Welcome back to the Walter Bosley channel for another great episode of Killifornia with Todd Wood and guest. It's Dana Rotting Jules. How are you, Dana?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. How are you?
Good, good, good. Really looking forward to this episode. It's always great when you're on because it's just more fascinating info than ever imagined was out there. So, um, Todd, let's jump right in. We're talking about the Stephen Hurd case today.
Yes. Yes. Let me just give you before I we break into the case, let me just give you some of the basic background of this case. First I'm gonna say after the Manson murders and the Zodiac murders in 1969, in the year 1970, there was sort of a wave of murders that sort of had connections to the occult. Um, and Stephen Hurd and the Sons of Satan are this four pi group. That's just one of them amongst many. Um, on June 2nd, Stephen Hurd, Herman Taylor, and Arthur Moose Hulse robbed a gas station and subsequently murdered a gas station attendant, the night manager on duty, young 21-year-old Jerry Wayne Carlin, with a hatchet. And then the next day, on June 3rd, they murdered a woman by El Toro school teacher, 31 years old, with three stepkids and two children of her own, Florence Nancy Brown. But that case particularly is the more interesting case. All of it's a tragedy, but that one stands out because there's a lot of connections to the occult. For instance, devil worship. Stephen Hurd was openly a devil worshiper, where in many other cases, the occult and devil worship is sort of on the periphery. This one's very, very prevalent. Um, they removed her heart much in the same way Stanley Baker removed James Glauser's heart about a month and a half later in July of 1970. Uh, and from there, we'll just start the discussion. Um, Dana, what are your impressions of the Stephen Hurd case, and for lack of a better way of saying it, the Sons of Satan case?
Well, I think after a lot of discussion with you, really kind of looking into the finer details, I think that Stephen Hurd, ultimately, I wouldn't say that he was a patsy, but he was the fall guy.
Hmm.
I don't believe that he, was the mastermind behind the crime. When you look at the facts, it just doesn't support what happened and why he was the person that, I mean, him and Moose were both sentenced to life in prison, and Stephen
Hmm.
Hurd passed away quietly. They didn't announce it, which was very strange. But,
Yeah.
it's when you look at the case and the boys, because I'm calling them boys, because I mean, he's 20 years old. He might as well be a kid. He's a kid to me.
Yeah.
When these boys get arrested, the cops are, pretty quick to move and say that the case is open and shut and that it's been solved. And I found that to be really odd, especially considering, what they did to Florence Brown's body.
Yeah.
They said it looked like someone with surgical precision or knowledge did it, someone with knowledge of human anatomy, removing flesh from the right thigh, like three ribs, I think both of her lungs, and then her heart were missing. And that, I'm a nurse. I've had to do CPR on, you know, uh, like double bypass heart surgery patients. I know that that's not easy to do any of that. So
Hmm.
it's when you look at what happened and they close the case, and then we have one of these individuals who had already been arrested, who manages to stay out of the press until the trial, Timothy Montag. All of the sudden, we get uh, Ellen Daniels. She has many names that she goes by, Melanie Daniels. These are all aliases, in my opinion, because we can't find her factually as far as what her name is. But she ends up getting connected to the crime. She was between 30 and 32, the ages range. And that's a huge age disparity because Stephen Hurd was the oldest. So, what is this woman doing hanging out with this young group of kids? That was the first red flag to me was why is this older woman hanging out with these boys?
Mhm.
involved in this activity, especially if Stephen Hurd is telling the truth.
Right. I mean, it's such a fascinating case. And with Melanie Daniels, Ellen Daniels, what have you, she's very connected to motorcycle gangs. And I guess for lack of a better way of saying it again, these boys were kind of LARPing in a way, pretending to be a chapter of a very well established Lancaster, Pennsylvania motorcycle gang by the name of the Sons of Satan. In my opinion, and I don't know if you agree with this, but you have to get permission, or I did ask Google, they agree too. You have to get permission to start a uh, motorcycle gang chapter. You can't just snap your fingers and do it. And also, you have to pay dues to the head of the gang, who in this case was John Satan Marin. Um, would you go into a little bit about Melanie Daniels' experience with motorcycle gangs and what is in motorcycle gang lingo? There's a misfit, and then the gang she belonged to, the Nomads.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was looking at her, because I was like, okay, she gets brought in, roughly a month after they say that this case is closed, and they're like, oh, she was already in jail. Imagine that. And I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. Did she get arrested with anybody else? And she did. She got arrested with a man named John Edward Gray, and I can't remember the other guy's name. I think it's like John Filippo. So John Edward Gray was listed as the vice president of the Misfit Nomads, which was a motorcycle gang per the police. That was the alias that he gave. Now, Melanie and him both have the same address, so they were living together at the time of the crimes, right? Now, her and these two other men are arrested, yet she's the only one that's fingered in relation to the Florence Brown murder. That is the first huge red flag to me because we have this one motorcycle gang over here, the Sons of Satan. Now, I agree with you that you do have to have permission to, start your own, like to be patched in, right? To be able to
Yeah.
wear the colors, to wear the patch. But when you look on the One Percenter website, Stephen Hurd is listed as the president of that chapter of the Sons of Satan, and Arthur
Hmm.
Moose Hulse was listed as a prospect at that time. So
That's
it
interesting.
seems, yeah, it seems that somebody was aware, and I don't know who. Now, going back to the Misfit Nomads, they don't really seem to have a home. They kind of seem to be like a floater crew, which is
Mhm.
odd to me. So I don't know if they're sanctioned to kind of move in and out of other groups, or if they just didn't have a really long lifespan. That could also be a possibility. I don't really know. But, Melanie Daniels, when she was arrested with those guys, that was in, I think, December of 1969. So shortly, before all of this happening. And it's weird because they get caught doing something that the Manson family got caught doing. Obviously, Manson's already in jail, but some of the other members that got caught, they were busted with hundreds of pills. They didn't specify what kind. They had a lot of marijuana. They had stolen unregistered guns, and they had stolen credit cards on them. So I'm curious if there's some cross-section there. Now, with Melanie Daniels, this goes back even further to 1968 because her previous old man, a guy by the name of Fred Smith, who was also a member of the Misfit Nomads, apparently he tried to kidnap her and take her to Vegas to force her to marry him. I don't really know how all of that tracks, but anyways, the feds get involved. He gets arrested. For some reason, they let him go, and then he is found shot in the back of the head and was thrown over a bank in Malibu, and they just kind of left it at that because there was a bunch of turf wars going on with these motorcycle gangs, and his murder was never solved. So I
Right.
think that that speaks to her being a dangerous woman in general.
Right, right. Another interesting aspect to this is the Four Pi movement. And Stephen Hurd, according to Ed Sanders' unpublished manuscript, he was introduced to the Four Pi movement and brought into the Four Pi movement by his cellmate in Provo, Utah, by the another biker by the name of Robert Stevens. So I don't know how you feel about this, but it seems like the biker connection to the Four Pi might be sort of a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, it tracks for the process. The process literally says that they use these motorcycle gangs as like their street thugs, you know?
Yeah.
It totally tracks for me, and we already know Victor Wilde, a Gypsy Joker, you know, he's a processian. He was a
Hmm.
high-ranking processian. He is named in the Ed Sanders lawsuit in the UK. He's named in the book in the original
Right.
publication of the family.
Hmm.
So, you know, I tried to find Stephen Hurd's cellmate in Provo. I also tried to find Stephen Hurd in Provo. I couldn't find anything, and Stephen Hurd told Ed and his doctor that was seeing him in jail that this individual was killed in a gangland shootout in I think early 68 or 69. They both got out and they headed to California. It would track though if you're recruiting somebody in jail. I
Hmm.
mean, it's cons hanging out with cons. It's the same thing with Manson, right?
Yeah.
Like it's the same thing with all of these people. Like they're
Yeah.
not hippies. These people
No,
are
they're not.
con men. They're felons that grew their hair out.
Right.
That's it.
Hmm. Yeah. The interesting idea here with the Four Pi movement, and I'm not sure if this is the Four Pi movement or the Sons of Satan. I kind of go back and forth with this. The idea that snuffing a victim or killing somebody is okay as long as a part of them is used as tribute. And like you said before, and both of us are working on this research together. Um, the heart, the ribs, the lungs, meat from the thigh, the right arm, they were all removed and used in satanic rituals and cannibalism, perhaps. At least we know Stephen Hurd used it in the heart. He ate the heart, or part of the heart, and the other part he burnt and used the ashes and paper from the ashes to make a upside down pentagram Star of Death. Um, I'm just wondering, what do you think? Do you think that the process church was advocating for this type of human sacrifice? Or do you think this is the idea of the breakaway group, the Four Pi?
I think it's the process. I mean,
Yeah,
Gordon Mustaine from the Church of Scientology, you know, he's the one that said that Timothy Wiley left inner teachings at a Scientology meeting and he's sitting there reading it. And, you know, processians are sitting there saying in these private meetings in the 60s that, and it's very similar to the Zodiac, right? Like
right.
you're killing someone to free their soul, like you're going to be able
Hmm.
to reconnect with them in the afterlife. And I feel like that's a very common theme. Now, as far as what flavor Stephen
Yeah.
Hurd's group was particularly engaged in, I don't
Hmm.
really know. But, you know, it's Stephen Hurd that's bringing up this 4P, 4 pi thing. You know,
Hmm.
that's coming out of his mouth. And so
Right.
that's, I don't think that that's not coming, he's just pulling it out of his rear end. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Yeah.
Because of all the specific information that he was able to give and, you know, what ended up happening to him while he was in jail and his trial getting delayed, in my opinion, speaks to the state and his attorney working together to railroad his case so that he would
Yeah.
be the fall guy.
Right. No, I agree 100%. 100%. And you know, it's interesting. I think who was I? I was talking to William, and it seems like a lot of there's a lot of mix up between the Heard case and the Stanley Baker case because they were so close together. And we've talked about this, you and I, extensively, but it's so interesting that every all these killers that practice heart extraction all spent time in the Haight-Ashbury. And after the murder of Florence Nancy Brown, they take her station wagon, and of course they're trying to go visit a friend of Melanie Daniels or whatever her name is at San Quentin. But Stephen Hurd's going to try and visit the Grand Chingon. Um, do you think that there's a for sure connection between all three of these killers, Stephen Hurd, Stanley Baker, Tony Costa? Or do you think they all are all separate, or do you think they are all connected to the four pi or the process in one way, shape, or form?
I think that they're all connected. Now, granted, Tony Costa's timeline and him being on the East Coast, we have a little bit of a disparity there, right? But,
Hmm.
Tony Costa comes over to Haight-Ashbury. He's doing acid, doing God knows what. And, he's stealing medical equipment.
Hmm.
That's very strange. Victor Wilde was working with medical equipment as well. So we have a couple people that have access to medical equipment to do
Right.
surgical extractions. Um, as far as a direct connection, I think that the argument's there, and here's why. Because of the element of the Weather Underground, right?
Right.
Because it's these things, chaos, death, destruction. We know that the Weather Underground praised Charles Manson, right? And we know that Charles Manson is process and Scientology. I do think that they're all connected. I don't think that it's a coincidence that these things are happening, back to back to back, and there are certain similarities. And also, even though it's not with the extractions, I think it's the same thing with John Linley Frazier. I think that
Hmm.
John Linley Frazier was railroaded, but I think that
Right.
all of these guys, it was all kind of the same movement.
Right.
And I think that some of them were, maybe more prone, maybe due to
Hmm.
their drug use of,
Yeah.
hanging out with motorcycle gangs. I think that that appeals to a certain type of person, um, and just what your social life is like.
Right. That's interesting. It seems like what was I going to say? My brain isn't working at this time of day, Dana. My brain stops working. Um, okay, what I was going to say was even Hurd himself admitted to joining the Weather Underground.
Yeah.
And the fascinating thing is that he said the words he used is he also infiltrated the Nazis. Like he uses the word infiltrated, as in he was doing it on the behalf of somebody else.
Yeah.
That I find that extraordinarily interesting. And then there's the question of this Grand Shingon, this Leif Erikson or Robert Erikson. Do you get the impression perhaps that he's maybe an elite or perhaps one of these motorcycle people?
I think it's an elitist. I mean, it's what kind of name is that, right? Like Leif Erikson, like,
Yeah,
someone that's a very historically prominent name, but it's, we can't find the guy, right? Because there's a
yeah.
million of them, Robert and Leif. Um, I think that because at one point, when Stephen Hurd was being interviewed in the papers, because I like to look at all of the press that comes out to see how
Mhm.
the story changes. Sometimes you find,
Right.
nuggets of gold. And he made it sound and said like he was going to see the Anton LaVey at the Church of
Right.
Satan, right? So if
Mhm.
he's going there, we know that the Church of Satan was very private with their roster. We
Mhm.
also know that there were high-ranking individuals in society that were involved in the Church of Satan. I don't see Anton LaVey as like this goofball LARPer,
Right.
like Nicholas Schreck and Michael Aquino have tried to paint him out to
Mhm.
be. I think that he was a dangerous individual and was probably
Yeah.
involved in a lot of this stuff.
I would agree 100%. Anton would have to buy a red wig. Yeah, I can see him doing that. Like putting on a red wig and a fake beard, to look like, yeah, I mean, he'd have to LARP pretty hard. Pretty
Yeah.
hard. Yeah.
I don't think that
Um,
it was necessarily him. I think that the church and the whole like we're just goth libertarians, man, and we're just being edgy. Like I think that that's such a cop out and it's such a cover and it's the whole religious persecution bullshit that these people always pull and it's like, "No, don't look at us. You're being a Christian extremist." And it's like, "What if I wasn't a Christian and I'm still
yeah,
questioning you because I think that you guys are acting really suspicious? How can you
yeah,
say that,
yeah.
I think that there's a legitimacy to that. I do also wonder, who was Melanie Daniels wanting to go visit, right? Because why
Hmm.
is she living with the vice president of the Misfit Nomads? It's
Yeah.
who were they going to see? I would have questions about that.
Mhm.
And is the Grand Ching gone? Is it one person? Is it multiple people? I mean, Stephen Hurd identified one person, and I
Yeah.
believe that the story that he gave initially is what happened.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I believe what if I'm remembering the manuscript correctly, one of the things that Hurd said is there are different Chingons for different districts. So there are multiple Chingons. That means Manson was a Chingon, even though Hurd did not like Manson, apparently, or did not identify as Manson or whatever. Um, so that means that all of our previous threes, Jolly, West, William, Joseph, Brian, all those people, Ronald Stark, they're still on the table. That just makes our job a lot harder because there's multiple Chingons now. So, you know, that's the way the boat flows, I suppose, Dana.
Yeah,
Um,
well, I mean, he said that he didn't like being identified with Manson because Manson was a hippie, right? And
yeah, right.
he's like, I'm not a hippie, I'm a Satanist. Like,
Yeah,
and Stephen Hurd said, like, he's like, most of these people promote devil worship in private. I'm public. And I'm like,
right.
touche, young man. You're saying something there, and I'm hearing you
Yeah.
because he's right. It's they're doing these things privately. He's very open publicly,
Hmm.
and the individual that was initially arrested for the murder, who ended up
Hmm.
going state's witness and kind of tried to discredit the group, the Sons of Satan, or just the group in general as being anything serious.
Yeah.
He even said, he's like, well, like they were kind of into devil worship, but they weren't like super serious about it. And it's like,
Hmm.
well, what is your barometer of being serious? And how long were you around these people? The
They,
cops arrested
yeah.
Timothy Montag, that guy first. He
Hmm.
was the only person that they had for a long time. And then he ends up, going state's witness and he got a deal. They
Yeah.
even admit to it that he got a deal and he walked free.
Hmm.
So, what
Right.
did he
And
know?
I mean, you're not, once you cut out a woman's heart, remove her ribs, her lungs, you're not LARPing anymore.
No,
That's it. It's no
no,
longer a live action role-playing game at that point. It's
no.
real life. Um, but yeah, no, the Montauk thing is fascinating. Because that guy's a mystery. I'm almost tempted, like I've been trying to think of strategies of how to search these people and how to figure out what they're doing. I think Christopher Gypsy Ghibli might be a little bit easier because he's from Oregon. So maybe running a newspaper archive search for him for the in the Oregon newspaper might bear some fruit, but maybe not. Um, and 1970 in general was just a mess. I call it the summer of blood, just
Straight up.
because, yeah, because I mean, Ed Sanders brings up a good point. Uh, were these people activated to go to war, or even though they weren't targeted, Jerry Wayne Carlin and Florence Nancy Brown, those, like you said, murders of convenience. It's so bizarre that all this stuff happens all in the same summer between Stanley Dean Baker, Stephen Hurd, the sleeping bag murders, the murders of John B. Hood and Sandra Garcia, um, John Linley Frazier killing the Oda family days before the glasses are supposed to be entered into evidence, prescribed by Victor Oda. I mean, it's too much to be a coincidence. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that 110%. It's like, okay, well, how many connections to the Weather Underground does it take, quite frankly? Because I think that the process and the Weather Underground are the biggest tendons here that link all of these things, right? Because
Right.
it's total violence, it's all in a short amount of time, and what we see, especially with Stephen Hurd, and this is why Stephen Hurd's case bothers me so much, A, because of his age. I'm not saying that like the guy was innocent, but you know, they get arrested, and obviously because of everything that has just happened with Manson, it's all in the press, right? It's like, oh, like this crazy cult, drug cult, satanic cult, nobody knows what's going on, people are scared, understandably so,
Yeah.
but the judge imposes a gag order, and the lawyers are complaining that it's the most strict gag order that's ever been put into effect in the state of California up to that time legally, where even citizens could not talk about the case. I don't know how they enforced that. That sounds like
Yeah.
total bullshit to me, but that was what he was trying to impose. And when Stephen Hurd, Melanie Daniels, Moose Hulse, and Christopher Gibney they're all essentially supposed to go to trial around the same time. Melanie Daniels ends up going first. She gets the shortest amount of time. Stephen Hurd gets this very interesting lawyer. He's a very interesting character to me. His name is William Gamble.
Hmm.
And William Gamble comes in right when these trial dates are set. And William Gamble, Stephen Hurd had already been evaluated by five different psychiatrists by that time, and all
Right.
five declared him competent and sane. And so they said, okay, we'll go to trial. William Gamble comes in and he goes, I want to try one more time.
Right.
And what happens? Stephen Hurd ends up going to Atascadero, probably getting his brain cooked for another 4.5 years. And I say this because when he ended up going to trial, he had to be tranquilized. That was the words that they used, that the judge
Hmm.
used, and that William Gamble used. That Stephen Hurd had to be medically tranquilized in order to testify on the stand. That's a violation of his constitutional rights. That would be, confessing under duress or false pretenses. You're inebriated, right? What happened from when he was able to testify independently to 4 years at Atascadero, where we know that they're running MK Ultra stuff. They're cooking people's brains, right? And it's interesting because Stephen Hurd and this crew were really high on Reds. That's what they called them. But it was Seconal, which is a barbiturate. It's like Xanax on steroids. Now, if you take somebody off of that immediately, the withdrawals can kill you. It's one of the
Hmm.
only drugs in the entire world that can kill you. You'll think other drugs will kill you, but they won't. Alcohol and this stuff is the only two. So, whatever statements he gave initially, he is the most lucid. He is
Hmm.
the most in touch with reality. And in my
Yeah.
opinion, he's being the most honest. Now,
Hmm.
obviously, they're going to have to medically wean him off of that medication while he's in jail or, while he's in a state hospital. But there's no reason for him to have been evaluated by five different psychologists, psychiatrists who knew what he was addicted to, who
Right.
knew that he had to be medically weaned. And then all of the sudden, we're just waiting for what? And he didn't change the only thing that he changed from his story was he was a witness to the ritual,
Right.
to he participated. That's the only thing that changed.
Hmm. Yeah. No, it's almost like Gamble got into his ear a little bit.
I think Gamble more than got into his ear because
Got.
Gamble, so William Gamble is extremely suspicious. I think
Hmm.
that he's some type of spook because he was the headmaster of a privately funded high school, allegedly. This high
Hmm.
school had a special program for West Point, a special program for what appears to be naval intelligence, and a couple of other DoD programs. As
Hmm.
soon as he left, the school shut down. That's not weird at all. Then he goes and decides to get his his law degree.
Hmm.
He passes the bar, and as soon as he passes the bar, allegedly, the Brotherhood of Eternal Love comes and approaches him.
Yeah.
Why? Because he's a narcotics expert. How are you a narcotics expert when you just passed the bar? So we have the Brotherhood of Eternal Love coming to approach him, and then what happens? He literally says that he volunteered to take Stephen Hurd's case because of his training in psychiatric evaluation in the Navy.
Yes. Psychological engineering, I
That's
believe
it.
is.
Yeah, I'm like, what are
Yeah.
you talking about, bro?
Hmm. And that title within itself sounds like MK Ultra. Psychological engine. You're engineering something. You're
Yeah,
building something essentially. I
yeah.
mean, that's pretty crazy. And another thing I want to bring up, for pie related, real quick before I forget, is Arliss Perry. Now, if the rules of you have to have a piece of her to pay tribute to Satan or whoever, then anybody who's interested in asking this question too, all of Arliss Perry was the tribute. Just some of Florence Nancy Brown was the tribute. All of Arliss Perry was the tribute. Okay, so me saying that, we can get back on task. Sorry, Dana, I just had to say that before I forgot.
No, I think it's valid. I mean, I just I don't accept this argument of it was just a different time. It's like, no, this is too many things happening all at
Mhm.
once, and these people on the periphery are reporting the same things. And why are we seeing? Because we know what happened in the John Lonely Frazier case. I mean, you've got people from whatever that personality department for the Navy, that person stepped in like to help with his
Mhm.
case. You've got this William Gamble guy that comes in. And I think
Yeah.
that William Gamble kind of overplayed his hand a little bit and ended up, completely tanking the case for his client because
Yeah.
he's like, oh, this is a violation of his rights. And it's like, but dude, he's stuck in a
Mhm.
Tascadero because of you. There were multiple doctors that declared him sane. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? So there's always, in my opinion, I think that looking at the legal counsel is a really important aspect because it helps kind of paint a better picture of what
Right.
network you're dealing with. And we know that the Brotherhood of Eternal Love was involved. Obviously, Haight-Ashbury, but we know now that they were involved with Charles Manson since I've got
And the
Michael
Weather
Recon
Underground.
and the Weather Underground. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I've got Michael Reconciuto and Charles Manson working together at the
Oh,
Straight Theater in
well,
1967.
what? Yeah, please, would you elaborate on that a little bit, and how important that is, and what play it was, just so people know?
I don't know if I remember what play. All right. This was a lead that Maury Terry had alluded to. And when I went to Ed Sanders' archive and you're looking through his notes and his conversations with Maury,
Mhm.
me and George from CavDev had been working on it. And he was like, all of this tracks for what Michael Reconciuto was doing at the time. And so we both assumed, okay,
Mhm.
this is Michael. Um, then someone sent me, it is the flyer for the inaugural opening of the Straight
Wow.
Theater as it was in 1967. I know that the Grateful Dead was the last band to play that night,
Yeah.
but Michael Reconciuto was a technical director or technical manager, and Charles Manson was a stagehand. So they were absolutely hanging out together.
Mhm.
So all of that stuff about Michael Reconciuto saying that he was going to dinner with Shorty Shea and Charles Manson and Abigail Folger, all of this stuff, hanging out with Abby, that Charlie wanted to ball Abigail and she didn't want to sleep with him. And, she's funding the Himalayan Academy, giving money to Esalen. She's paying for Wojciech Frykowski's drug operation. I think that all of it tracks, and Maury Terry has been vindicated in a very deep way because that's a really big thing to be right about.
Mhm. Oh yeah. No, that is huge. That connects Manson. Uh, it's like 3 degrees of separation. It connects Manson to Reconasciuto to the Promise Software stuff, the Promise Software stuff to 9/11, and on and on and on we go. So that is beyond mind-blowing, Dana. That is just some fantastic work. I mean, that is awesome.
Well, and also, because nobody really talks about it,
Mhm.
Danny Casolaro's sister was found dead in the Haight-Ashbury in 1970. So, what the
Mhm.
fuck was Danny Casolaro's little sister doing there when Michael Reconciuto was there and the family was
Right.
there? Because not all the family was arrested. I
In the
just don't,
process.
yeah, I don't see these things as coincidental. She
Mhm.
leaves from, she just got married. She literally leaves her old man, goes
Mhm.
to the Haight-Ashbury, and suicides herself with drugs. I don't think so.
Right. Right. I mean, the connections and I mean, all of this is just suspicious isn't even the word. Dana, do you have a better word than suspicious?
No, I wish I did. Absolutely not.
I'm gonna have to invent one. Uh, I'll invent it later, and I'll have an unveiling of this new word on a future episode of Killifornia. That's what we'll do. We'll collaborate. We'll figure out a new word that's better than suspicious.
It'll be so. I've got a question that as I've been hearing about this case and thinking about all the cases, we seem to have this thread, and maybe it's not as prevalent as I think, but there's this thread of flesh eating and blood drinking that, of course, I've talked about before in episodes, and I get the feeling that there's some undercurrent subculture beneath and behind all these different groups that we've been talking about, that have been around for decades and such. But there's one unidentified little group or thread tying all these groups together, which is where they're possibly getting this flesh eating and blood drinking uh, practice. Have either one of you, Dana, have you come across anything that would give you that same suspicion?
I mean, you have to wonder why, especially they don't say it was the Manson family specifically, but we know that according to Ed, according to informant reports and police reports, that they were doing all kinds of evil shit on camera, and also making pornography along with it. But, where did they get the idea to mix LSD with animals' blood and use that in sex rituals and drink it that way, right? It seems very specific, and I just feel like it's not really a random idea. Somebody much smarter than somebody like, Charlie or Stephen
Right.
Hurd or,
Sure.
Stanley Dean Baker, John Linley Frazier. It's I don't know what the main undercurrent is. That's why
Well,
I think that the Chingon thing really
mhm.
speaks to, like, the validity of the Chingon thing speaks to
Okay.
it, right?
Well,
Is
uh,
there a go ahead, Todd, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, like, also with blood drinking rituals, you can kind of create the illusion of a religious experience, right?
Mhm.
Blood drinking rituals, you mix peyote and THC in the blood, kind of like Magdalena Solis and her cult did, compared with theatrics and stage magic, can create the illusion of a religious experience, thus making someone who is on the fence of being in a cult or being controlled very controllable.
Mhm.
Now this person on stage isn't just some goofball. This is the voice of God. This is God's chosen messenger, right? Same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any either Todd in what you've researched and Dana certainly in your research, is there any connection to Stockton, California?
It's funny that you mentioned that. I think in the manuscript that Ed put out between Stockton and maybe Sonora. That's where the Misfit Nomads were. That's where she was. That's where Melanie Daniels. She was in
Mm.
Northern California.
Okay.
That was between Stockton and I think Sonora.
Like
If that's the kind
Merced
of
or
reference you're looking for.
Modesto or Fresno.
Yeah. Hmm.
Fresno. But yeah, Stockton, California, because Malia has learned, from an interesting source, and from, we've had some other source info come in that there is reportedly a pretty bad group of people in Stockton that
Hmm.
there's missing persons cases up there, and this is the
Hmm.
kind of thing that's allegedly happening to them. These are blood drinkers.
Hmm.
And I was just curious. Now that you tell me that
All right.
the Misfits
Well,
were, in that area, and that there's case stuff connected to that area, and now, I wonder, okay, what is going on in Stockton?
right. Also, I should bring up Richard Chase, who's a very famous blood drinker.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what Richard Chase had was what they called Renfield syndrome. It's the psychological need to drink blood, but just like Wendigo psychosis, Renfield syndrome is very, very rare. So if you're saying that these people are blood drinkers, it's very rare that two people with Renfield syndrome would just randomly meet. So it's most likely some sort of gang or cult thing going on.
Yeah, that's the impression that we were given, that it is
Hmm.
kind of a little subculture that's kind of part of the underground, um,
Hmm.
down there, up there in Stockton.
Yeah.
So, Dana, does this, I mean, resonate with?
Oh yeah, I mean the motorcycle gangs. I mean, but the thing with, especially back then, because I found this problem with Victor Wilde, the Gypsy Jokers specifically, especially the high-ranking Jokers. A lot of them had family that were working in the police department, or within, like the county courts. And I think that a lot of these people were informants. I think that they were CIs. I think that Melanie Daniels was likely a CI. It's why are these people allowed to give aliases? Why do we have no information about where Melanie Daniels, Ellen Daniels, where she went to jail and when she got out? This is a very, very, very dangerous woman.
Mm,
They're really trying to put, a lid on this Sons of Satan thing and make it seem like it's some stupid conspiracy theory, yet the literal one percenter archive is listing Stephen Hurd as the president and Moose as a prospect. And there is a lot of this activity, especially 67, 68, 69, and 70, where they are in Stockton. What are they doing there? What's there? I don't really know because it's interesting when you think about that, just like some of these cults now, when they sort of move into their, I say, PR salvaging phase, where they're like, oh, we're philanthropic and we're helping the community. We're not killing animals or doing anything bad. These motorcycle gangs, they're having these turf wars, they're having these shootouts, they're involved in all this stuff, but at the exact same time, they are respected by portions of the community because they are involved in stuff that helps the community, like doing fundraisers for kids, like children's hospitals, the Salvation Army, things like that. So, I think, were thinking ahead on that part, like, hey, we got to make ourselves look good to like certain people, right? Kind of like the mafia, it's kind
mhm.
of the same thing. Um, it's just with the motorcycle gangs, it's really hard because I think that a lot of these people, I mean, I know Victor Wild was a CI, I have a CI
Mhm.
number, so was his old lady. And the lack of information that we have about the people involved in the Stephen Hurd case, besides Hurd and Moose, I think that they were CIs as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. The mere fact, I mean, the mathematical chance of Stephen Hurd being placed in a jail cell and his cellmate also being a theistic Satanist is pretty slim. It's almost like, in some ways, I kind of feel like Stephen Hurd was being groomed. But then on the other hand, we have this Melanie Daniels who's just a psycho woman talking about nailing people to the wall and not even being allowed to go to her own mother's funeral. Her father taking pictures of her mother's body and giving them to her. It almost kind of makes you wonder, did Melanie Daniels kill her mother? Don't you think?
I mean, maybe. I mean, yeah, it's nothing is really out of the realm here because it's like, why did she have this clearly abusive, psychologically abusive, emotionally abusive, at least, relationship with her father, where, she's not going to mom's funeral. Dad decides it's a good idea to take pictures of mom in the casket, and then rub it
Hmm.
in her face when she's younger. Um, Obviously, that pushed her into sort of the criminal sect of society, right? I don't
Yeah.
think that all bike riders are criminals. Don't at me. I'm just
Mhm.
saying, she was clearly drawn to that. Um, and then the stuff with Stephen Hurd in Utah, it's like I have to look and see, but there's a lot of weird ley line stuff in Utah, right? So where was
Yeah.
that prison in Provo? And
Yeah.
you're right. What are the chances? The
Mhm.
chances are literally non-existent. They're
Right.
putting these people together with some idea of who they are, especially because Stephen Hurd was in and out of the system as a kid.
Right. That's right. He was literally in and out of the system. Kim's from a really bad childhood. His stepfather abused the crap out of him. He drops out of high school. I mean, you're exactly right. Just one more thing, while I'm thinking about it for Stockton, California, is there's a Celine Navarro connection to Stockton, California. I think they were living there, although she was buried alive on Joaquin Island. I think that's the name of it in 1933. A cult ritual murder there. But that's a Stockton connection for you, Walter, to look into later at your convenience. Um,
Okay. Yeah. According to our source, um, there's some type of oh gosh, I'm doing a brain dump on the word. It's like a soup kitchen kind of situation where the homeless can go and get hot meals, and apparently they're disappearing from there,
For
or
real?
murder victims from there. Yeah, this is what the source told us.
the
We're
less
still
dead.
trying to look into this
The
to
whole
see if there's anything to substantiate it, but that's what the
right.
source told us.
Homeless are easy targets for serial killers because they're referred to as the less dead. Serial killers, there's
Sure.
usually think that no one's going to miss them or prostitutes or runaways.
and
The
and
four, oh,
it
go ahead.
it makes them ripe for ritualistic slaying too, or the more
Right.
gruesome things.
That's it. Well, that's interesting that you said that. Stephen Hurd was talking about that when it comes to the four pie human sacrifice stuff. He says every 5 months, but I think that was a misprint. I think it's probably closer to every equinox. Um, all runaways, drifters, homeless people, things of that nature were people who were taken and being sacrificed by the Four Pie movement, according to Hurd and Ed Sanders
Hmm.
and his research. Um, but it doesn't surprise me at all. Homeless, again, like homeless people are easy targets. No one's looking for them,
Right.
Well,
you
the other
know?
thing is that the process, notoriously, it's something that they leave out of their history, which is why I think it's very suspicious. None of them will acknowledge it at all, including Mr. Lucy and Greaves, Dougie Doug. Their big thing was coffee houses and soup kitchens.
Hmm.
And there was a report, and it is a very I think that the person was being honest. Obviously, they wanted to be anonymous, but this was an old report that you can find in the archive. It was a review of their coffee house, and somebody found a skull fragment and human hair in their soup at this
Mm.
kitchen. So these things don't sound strange to me. The reason why it made my ears perk up is because I know that the process ran these things. This was their way of recruiting. When they were in Canada specifically, they got investigated by the House of Commons because they were using it as a prostitution and drug trafficking center.
Yeah.
And they were getting federal grants from the Canadian government for that. And regardless, they still came here, and Henry Kissinger gave them the stamp of approval for their programs here, which is extremely suspicious considering his close relationship with Cocaine Bob Evans, but I digress. I think that that tracks for what these people do. It's a great way to recruit, and also it's unfortunately it's cheap overhead, right, for
Yeah.
what you need.
Yeah. Yeah. Here,
Yeah.
here, and I've talked about this on a past episode with Todd, but here in the San Bernardino Valley, what they're one of the things we're infamous for is the cults, the groups will use the swingers clubs as a way to trap and recruit, sex and drugs. And then, oh, gee, if you think those two combined are exciting, add magic. Let's add some black magic to it. And if you
Hmm.
join, come behind the curtain here, and on and so forth. And that's long been a part of the lore here in the San Bernardino Valley in the IE.
Hmm.
And the bike gangs have their involvement in that. Um,
Hmm.
so
Well, yeah, because I mean, in the Son of Sam case, there was gosh, I think it was Tiny Lentini. He talked about he was in a motorcycle gang and they worked security for these parties at Mr. Real Estate's house, where
Right.
these child sacrifices were going on. Mike Codella, former NYPD, he worked 9/11. He's a very respectable person with his resume checks out. He's not a charlatan. He's not out here telling tales outside of school. He believes what these informants told him and what Tiny told him, that's a big part of what the motorcycle gangs were used for by these very wealthy individuals. And he said that some of the fellow bikers that they would get in on the action, but He said some of them were just kind of freaked out, and so they would just do their job and stand at the door and rough up or kick out whoever they needed to kick out, and they got free drugs out of it or they got money, so they didn't care.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I just watched that interview with that detective you just mentioned, and I couldn't help but think about the Hurd case and all the motorcycle gang connections and all that. Um, the whole thing is just suspicious, don't you think?
There's
Oh
a
yeah.
word. Suspicious. There you
There
go.
you go.
That's the
That's it.
word. It's it. We did it.
Well,
That's it.
believe it or not, we're approaching a total of an hour here. Is there anything you want to kind of cap all today's discussion off with and kind of sum it up?
Dana?
Oh, I was waiting for you.
Okay. Well, our research, this is an ongoing investigation. Dana and my 4-pie research, it's going really well. Um, who knows what we're going to find next? We just got to keep working on it, and then things may come slowly. But if anything's suspicious, we'll keep you guys informed.
Cool.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I would like to say, because you guys have a bigger audience, William Gamble, I know that you have a very big law firm in California. If you would like to speak to one of us, I have a lot of questions, please. Um, because he's still alive, and I have a lot of questions about why he
I,
got involved in the Heard case. And if anybody knows how to access California court records for the Stephen Heard case, because they do not exist, there's literally nothing about any of these trials. Please get in contact with one of us because, me and Todd are only scratching the surface here, but I would say that we're investigating and putting together the factual story of what happened. I feel like there's a lot of misinformation out there about Stephen Hurd in particular. Um, there's a lot more to the story, and Stephen Hurd was he was the fall guy. It's just unfortunate what happened because the victims didn't get justice.
well,
right.
I might be able to help you there, being the one of us three living in California, and I can run over and do a direct look through, the court records and see what I can find to that extent.
That would
Okay.
be great.
Yeah.
So I can check that out, as soon as it's possible, and get back to you on that. So but always, Todd and Dana, you guys bring an excellent episode, excellent discussion, and I feel like each time we've only just got started. So we got to do this again. And
Mhm.
Dana, where can everybody find you?
I am on YouTube at Rotting Jewels, X, Twitter, whatever, Dana Duda, and on podcasts, it's What is the Process? And next time I will have my Bob Evans glasses because I got a pair.
Hey.
Oh,
All right, Todd. So wrap it up for us, and that'll be another episode of Killifornia.
thank you to the Bossverse for coming and indulging in this very suspicious episode of California. Um, keep your eyes on Merriam-Webster's dictionary because suspicious is going to be added very soon.
That's right. That's
And
right.
have a wonderful, beautiful evening.
Alrighty, you too. And